When the HOA declared war on my floating guest suite, I unleashed a chaotic water fight that turned conformity on its head. Could laughter be the key to revolutionizing our stifling neighborhood? Hey there, Porch Patrol Squad. Let me know if you've ever locked horns with a Karen like in today's story. Smash that like button and spill the tea in the comments. And if you're craving more outrageous HOA battles, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Believe me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. In the enthusiastic aftershock of our newfound solidarity, I couldn't help but relish the delicious irony of how a minor mishap, a colossal cascade of water, could breathe life into our stagnant neighborhood. As the laughter continued to echo through the now saturated clubhouse and the sun sank lower, casting a golden glow over every cheerful face, I felt an invigorating sense of purpose swell in my chest. The whole idea of turning our aquatic ruckus into a neighborhood renaissance stirred the creative juices within me like a good cup of coffee, or better yet, a well-mixed pitcher of sangria, refreshing with a hint of zest. So, what's next? How about we make it official and call it the Soggy Summit? Sam piped in, his typically booming laughter punctuating the laughter-washed whispers of our comrades. The term felt perfectly absurd, yet fitting, and I couldn't help but bask in how this absurdity had transpired into a source of united enthusiasm. There was no denying that Gloria, our typically intimidating HOA dictator, was now interestingly participating in the charade. The tight lines of authority around her mouth slowly softened as she offered suggestions amidst her shivering replies. Her sharp voice started to resemble a playful banter rather than the critical tones I'd grown to dread, and a hint of a smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Soggy Summit indeed. Perhaps we could draw up an agenda with items like how to create an environmental disaster with a single houseboat and top 10 ways to get back at Gloria, she quipped, causing chuckles to ripple around us once more. Wait, did I hear that correctly? Was Gloria cracking jokes? I must have tapped into an alternate dimension as laughter continued to lighten the damp air. Could our neighborhood debate become a festival of friendliness instead of a battlefield of formality? Emboldened by this unexpected tide of camaraderie, I pushed the meeting's agenda further, my heart racing with each suggestion I passed around. I propose we have art nights, where each of us can contribute our quirky expressions. And how about a complaint box that doubles as a popcorn machine? The collective nodding and chuckling of my neighbors as they considered my ideas transported me to a realm where bureaucracy became fun. Sam stood beside me, his wild curls dancing in rhythm to our joyful brainstorming. And without warning, he exclaimed, "And let's not forget Family Costume Day. I'm dreaming of a tie-dyed parade that'll put Gloria's gray gowns to shame." His dramatic flourish shattered any remaining whispers of past rigidness as we all burst into laughter. Who knew that the simple act of inundating the clubhouse with water would break the ice and unlock not just potential but hilarity? With every new idea proposed, I could feel the walls still festering from HOA oppression slowly begin to transform, like a derelict space bursting into bloom with vibrant flower power. However, a comedic chill settled in as I glanced over to find Gloria's features transitioning from amusement back to an ever so slightly flustered expression. "All right, let's table the costume day for now," she interjected, squaring her shoulders and restoring just a hint of her former gravitas. But acknowledging our amusement, she quickly added, "Though it would be quite a concern for the bylaws." Flashes of laughter were revived as I seized the opportunity for playful revenge against our neighborhood bedrock of formality. Bylaws? We don't know her. What's a few sequins and sarcasm amongst friends? With every shove of sarcasm into Gloria's domain of order, the crowd's spirit skyrocketed. The rebellion was ringing loudly in their hearts, and suddenly it felt as if we were crafting something monumental, transforming the very ethos of our HOA dictatorship into a uniquely playful experience. And as our ideas blossomed, I, your enthusiastic ringleader, finally tagged on the most monumental proposal of all. So, here's the grand finale, my neighbors. How about we make this summit an annual event? A revival of vacation spirit, celebrating our challenges and triumphs as a family of floating misfits. Cheers erupted at the idea like confetti streaming through the air, each cheer echoing jubilantly across the soaked carpets and gathering togetherness. As my eyes flickered around the room, catching the approving smiles and genuine cheer from our fellow residents, I could scarcely believe how far we'd come in a single memorable afternoon. Gloria, of all people, even gave a wave of her palm in support, quipping, "I'll even volunteer to introduce a pet talent show. Who wouldn't love to see Mr. Whiskers juggle?" Her hiccup of laughter mingled with ours, sealing the raucous joy of what we just envisioned together. As everyone began to mingle, trading ideas for potluck dishes and future neighborhood shenanigans, I found myself standing beside a bewildered Gloria, almost as if the universe had staged a mix-up in our procedural roles. "So, we can actually reconsider our power dynamics, huh?" I teased, handing over my last notion of hidden costume parades to her. She met my gaze with a hint of mischief dancing in her gray eyes, saying, "You'd be surprised at how easily one little boat can change the course of things." With that, I realized that perhaps we were not merely transitioning into a manageably chaotic partnership, but instead paving the way for an ongoing revolution, one where humor and resilience could prevail against tyranny. Would this be the pivot that united our tightly wound community into one full of joyous alliances instead of petty regulations? The growth of our soggy summit being fresh in everyone's minds brought an unexpected rush of creative chaos. Each neighbor seemed fueled by newfound enthusiasm, trading dish ideas, and even dreamt of potluck themes that began with S's. All ideas were being eagerly scrawled onto the chalkboard that once displayed rigorous HOA rulings, our rebellion artfully displayed. There were classic staples like soggy sliders and soggy nachos, all with a fitting dash of irony that left us rolling in laughter. I may have pushed the envelope a bit with soggy surprise, which I intentionally planned to keep surprising until last minute, knowing full well it would involve a bloated mix of whatever peculiar leftovers a person could muster. "Keeps them on their toes," I smirked, which earned a chorus of chuckles and approving nods. Who knew that a sprinkle of humor could turn seasonings of resentment into a banquet of camaraderie? As laughter rang throughout the clubhouse like the joyful clinking of glasses, I noticed a transformation come over Karen, who typically thrived on the agony of HOA policing. Her lips were twitching, perhaps in reaction to our absurdly enthusiastic menu planning, which she was obviously excluded from. The community spirit had somehow managed to dismantle her self-proclaimed status as the queen of all complaints. A faint smile flickered on her stern face as she located a seat closer to the lively chatter. Was I dreaming, or was Queen Karen attempting to mingle? "You know," she said with a chuckle that clearly surprised everyone, "I could whip up my famous sweet soggy pudding for the potluck." It was as if, amid the chaos, she'd experienced a full circle. She was actually collaborating. Or perhaps it still was an elaborate facade of her impending sabotage. Either way, none of us could stop cracking up. And just like that, another door opened into something ludicrously contagious. Things only got sillier, as Sam suggested that families don the silliest outfits possible as a summer tradition, which led everyone to parade around the clubhouse while tossing inflatable pool toys at each other like confetti. Gloria feigned strictness, her previous persona that day, but I caught her snickering more than once behind those hawk-like eyes of hers. All right, but please keep the pool floaties away from my perfectly organized file cabinet," she mockingly proclaimed as laughter erupted around the room. The fading remnants of her icy authority melted into thin air with each joke and spirited proposal thrown around, and what emerged was a strangely liberated coalition of neighbors, bonded not by rules, but by the sheer absurdity of our ambitions. Gloria's credibility seemed to dissipate with each giggle. Imagine that. The HOA had officially turned into a makeshift sitcom. As the evening wore on and the golden light outside dimmed, we felt the air vibrate with a communal sense of victory. It was no longer about my courtesy of water flooding, but rather a rebirth of our neighborhood, driven by humor and a collective spirit. And maybe, just maybe, I could get away with an extravagant water balloon event for next year's Soggy Summit, something people would talk about for ages. That alone was perhaps the greatest victory of all, proving that festivities born from acceptable frustrations could morph us into a rather colorful family of misfits. Sam whispered to me, "What if we spread a rumor that there's a clown shortage in the HOA? Bring in the inflatable ones." I burst into laughter, the wittiness of it all already spinning in my mind. Clowning it up wouldn't be too far off, especially if Gloria was spearheading it. As the hour unfolded, I realized that there was something quite refreshing about transforming our sullen HOA reality into a joyous one, albeit absent of the comfort zones we'd often retreated to. Here we were, concocting a festive haven in a place once rife with petty complaints, proving that freedom truly does thrive when laughter runs wild. The shared joy lifted spirits, something I had never imagined possible. We were beginning to feel like a unit forged from misadventures, cuisine, and a shared sense of rebellion against rules that were seldom questioned up until this moment. "We really ought to do this all year round," I exclaimed half seriously, envisioning weekly poolside happy hours under a flimsy tension of what the bylaws might have prescribed. Wouldn't it be a riot to totally ignore those silenced, boring stipulations if we spent enough time laughing? And as I surveyed the ongoing jubilations throughout the beloved clubhouse, I felt a warm rush of triumph bubbling up inside me. Gloria gathered the remains of her authority and conferred with the group, embodying the absurdity of the night. "I'd like to propose a toast," she called, somehow continuing to command attention among zany enthusiasms, "to our new camaraderie, complete with houseboats and clowns. May our future be filled with joy, laughter, and enough inflatable unicorns to sink even the mightiest of oppressors." Everyone raised their cups, all too willingly forgetting in that moment that we had once been divided by administrative fiction. We clinked cups together, my modest houseboat nestled eternally within escapades, an orchestrated sitcom-style revival, boldly asserting that, every once in a while, sanity could spiral joyously into delightful absurdity. So, had the tides of HOA oppression finally turned towards bubbling celebrations instead? The answer was resounding in my heart like synchronized laughter. Resoundingly, yes. The tows of my beloved houseboat by those joyless HOA drones were nothing short of tragic. Picture it, a chorus of seagulls weeping in despair as my charming floating guest suite, hues of sunny yellow and ocean blue, was yanked away from its cozy nook by the relentless grip of neighborhood bureaucracy. Gloria Stokes, the fearsome queen of regulations herself, had orchestrated this heinous act, relishing the chance to impose her strict ideals on my carefree lifestyle. I could just imagine her in her office, donning a triumphant smirk as she sipped her green tea, plotting the next phase of her clean-cut kingdom, an HOA utopia devoid of creativity and any hint of individuality. As if living in a bland nuclear suburb wasn't torture enough, I needed a plan, and Sam was the perfect accomplice to bring my ambitions to life. With his extensive knowledge of neighborhood lore and his penchant for the ludicrous, we devised a scheme that would not only demonstrate how ridiculous the HOA was, but also deliver the sweetest, pettiest slice of revenge. That Tuesday evening, during one of my notorious brainstorming sessions over nachos and soda at Sam's place, inspiration struck. I could recall the slight tilt in Gloria's voice when she announced at the last HOA meeting, "We must maintain order." With that delightful phrase playing on repeat in my mind, I proposed a plan: flood the clubhouse. Why not, right? A little chaos to disrupt their rigid world would surely be a lesson in accountability. The scheme came together in a matter of hours, bouncing ideas back and forth like two caffeinated squirrels. First, we gathered our secret weapon, a hose, 2 large buckets, and an excessive amount of theatrical flair. Dressed in our hose warriors outfits, waders and all, we devised a massive water attack to saturate the clubhouse lawn, staging it like a disenchanted marina that had washed up in a suburban wonderland. As the clock struck midnight, we commenced our operation with fervor, aiming to create the appropriate juxtaposition of absurdity to mock the HOA's tyrannical holds. Water streamed, giggles erupted, and the sensation of imminent rebellion tingled in our bones. Even the moon seemed to glow brighter, as if it too was wooed by our mischief. It didn't take long before the jovial sounds of splashing water turned into a violent cascade of sparkling mayhem. We watched from the nearby bushes as our cunning plan quickly unraveled before our eyes. With each bucket poured, the water pooled around the clubhouse like a horizon swelling with ominous clouds. Suddenly, Gloria's faithful flock of HOA members came milling about, drawn by the sound of rushing water and the alien sensation of chaos creeping upon their sterile environment. I could imagine the horror etched on their faces as they witnessed the once pristine clubhouse begin to transform into what literally looked like a scene from Finding Nemo. The absurdity of it made me burst into laughter, a cacophony of mirth echoing into the night. As the frenzy unfolded, we ducked behind a conveniently located tree, the shame of our filthy antics justified by the visual delight of the gleeful chaos we had sparked. Gloria, with her perfectly styled hair now frazzled in panic, dashed from her car to the clubhouse, jaw slack as she took in the shocking reality before her. "This is ridiculous," she screamed, shoving her clipboard into Karen's hands. It was positively exquisite. I almost felt bad until I remembered her face that morning as she ordered my houseboat out of the retention pond with a mere flick of her pen. My heart soared in triumph as I mentally replayed our earlier encounters. The irritation she pressed onto me had swiftly returned to her, and suddenly, her perfect little world was awash with uncertainty and water. As laughter bubbled up in my chest, I exchanged glances with Sam, who was grinning from ear to ear, clutching his sides in delight. However, my jubilation soon turned into sobering concern. Was our little water ballet going to cost me more than just the reprisal of my houseboat? I could almost hear the HOA collective gasp in horror, picturing them estimating the cleanup costs as they squeezed their overpriced lattes tighter in disbelief. Oh, the sweet prospects of a good public embarrassment. This could get us kicked out of our floating paradise, I quipped, deciding to step out from our hiding spot. With a twinkle in my eye and a bounce in my step, I felt a nagging hope brewing inside. What was a little water chaos compared to the potential stirring of true neighborly revolt? Before I could pin down my thoughts further, the shrill voice of Gloria erupted through the air as she barked orders like a twisted commander overseeing a sinking ship. "Everyone, grab a bucket! We can't let this foliage takeover happen." I couldn't resist but chime in through a burst of hearty laughter, yelling back, "But Gloria, we might just establish our very own beach resort right here in the clubhouse." My cheeky quip hung in the air, landing like a foreign object that disrupted the diligently prepped chaos. As the community gathered, their muddled faces reflecting genuine confusion mixed with unexpected chuckles. After all, sometimes a splash of rebellion can rally more than just uproar. Could it spark a sense of community? The question lingered, enticing my thoughts into the next fun chapter of our waterlogged adventure. The pandemonium in the clubhouse parking lot was a glorious sight. People scrambled with buckets, splashing water on each other as they attempted to restrain the rising tide of our delightful, chaotic creation. Gloria stood amidst the turmoil, her once immaculate appearance now marred by awkward drips and a furious expression that would have scared even the bravest of seagulls. I couldn't help but chuckle at the picture she made, looking less like an HOA president and more like the last life raft on the Titanic. My heart danced with satisfaction at the shared laughter and camaraderie blossoming among the neighbors, who were beginning to unite in ways I had only dreamt of since moving to this stiff-necked, overly poised neighborhood. Little did Gloria know, she had unwittingly orchestrated our very own comedic rebellion. Sam leaned close, barely containing his mirth. "Do you think if we throw a luau, they'll charge us for supplies?" he quipped, eyes sparkling with the mischief of 1,000 chuckling sprites. I raised an eyebrow, a grin creeping onto my face. The audacity of even suggesting we hold a stained sandy parade was both absurd and tantalizing. Was the HOA humorless enough to question a neighborly good time? I felt a rebellious wave wash over me once more. Who needed order when humor could bind a community? My heart raced at the prospect of not only reclaiming my space but also earning the respect, and perhaps the bewildered glee of my fellow residents. This was the magic of chaos, promising unexpected alliances, and the potential for long overdue laughter echoing in their pristine hearts. Meanwhile, Gloria, now bellowing orders like an opera diva having a temper tantrum, enlisted a few of her most loyal henchmen to form a human assembly line, complete with spruced-up buckets, filled with gloriously misguided intentions. "No," I wanted to yell with unchecked giddiness. "You can't build your own dam. You're making the heart of this community into a corporate-sponsored reservoir of conformity." I snickered, sharing a glance with Sam, who mimed an exaggerated facepalm. Gloria's spontaneous community effort quickly devolved into what seemed less like a purposeful restoration project and more like a slapstick comedy skit. And I suddenly felt like the director of this outrageous caper, applause echoing in the imagined hallways of my mind. "Jordan, come help us," one of my neighbors shouted, water drenching his eyebrows as he brandished a tipped bucket like a half-hearted weapon in a water balloon fight. Somehow, the camaraderie I had longed for broke through. Neighbors were laughing, joking, and bonding in a way that hadn't been possible under Gloria's iron reign. I took a step forward, grinning like a dog that had just found an open bag of treats. "Why not? Let's patch this up like a true community," I proclaimed, wading into the fun like a duck finding its pond. My spirit soared on the joyous chaos, despite every droplet that splashed onto my outfit. I felt liberated, one rebellious soul against the reign of conformity itself. Yet, as I brandished my own bucket and joined in the fray, pouring water into what the HOA might consider improper lawn care, like some poetic act of defiance, I had a fleeting thought. Would Gloria learn anything from this hilariously absurd fiasco? Would the crowning queen of bylaws ever come to grips with the power of laughter over dictates? With every splash, it became clear. I didn't just want her to find her power diminished. I wanted her to discover there was beauty in chaos, joy in rebellion. Perhaps, if I played my cards right, she might just see the splendor of broader horizons through a less rigid lens. Or perhaps I was only daydreaming about revolution by reflecting on my cleverly tranquilizing antics. The entire scene was absurdly cinematic, and I found myself reveling in the hilarity of it all. Just then, a larger group of kids from the neighborhood, having scuttled outside to investigate the commotion, joined our antics, squealing in delight. "Mom, look!" one exclaimed triumphantly. "It's a water fight." And with that stampede of energy, music to my ears, I could feel the bonding surfacing among everyone as if we were a rowdy cast in a spontaneous play whose script had been best described as public unity through rebellion. We were not just making memories, we were honing the foundation for a newfound community spirit, an ideal brewing in the depths of our laughter, nestled alongside ridiculousness. Just then, like a spotlight focused on an uninvited guest, Gloria turned her laser glare on me specifically, eyebrows pinched together like her mouth was busy processing a bitter lemon treat. "Jordan, hail," she barked, and I could almost hear the collective intake of breath from those within earshot. A moment of electric tension suspended like a tight wire stretched to its limit. Oh, how I relished that sound. "This is not how we solve problems in our community," she screeched, struggling to hold on to her last shred of authority. But the laughter from everyone else surged like an enthusiastic wave, vibrating the air around us, drowning her out entirely. Nothing contained within the walls of strict decorum stood a chance against the uncontested, joyful chaos erupting around us. Did she really think she could wipe smiles off our faces with her disapproving frown? Would her stormy demeanor extinguish our laughter, or would that only yield further absurdity? As the residents' laughter crescendoed, Gloria struggled against her own features' tight constraints, caught between authority and the delightful rebellion filled with splashes and giggles. Could she genuinely fathom that she had been outdone? My heart sang with wild glee at this prospect. Maybe, just maybe, I'd unearthed not only sweet revenge, but also the tiniest spark of change within the HOA's iron grip. Perhaps a flexible patio would allow for much better social bonding, I thought, beams of inspiration forming bridges between my honest creativity and the neighbors around me. The finale of our night was only just beginning, one that boasted a glimmer of promise, a question reverberating within me. How much joy would it take before Gloria reluctantly joined our newfound revolution of laughter and delight? How could I have known that pesky little daydream would bloom into a full-fledged riotous reality right before my eyes? Just as I prepared to revel in my budding dare-to-dream moment, my spirit soared higher, all while Gloria's expression twisted further into something only comparable to someone who'd just bitten into a rotten apple. Surrounding me, the uproarious laughter amplified, overflowing like water bubbling out of a pot, and it only fueled my ambition to paint even bigger strokes on this canvas of rebellion. As I channeled my inner maestro, orchestrating the chaos, I snatched a water-soaked bucket and launched a tsunami-sized splash towards Sam. Instead of a petty revenge, he erupted into laughter, his curls bobbing like a buoy amidst the tide of our shenanigans. The camaraderie solidified at that moment, as laughter cemented bonds and obliterated any former trepidation about the HOA's watchful eye. "Oh, how the tides have turned," I muttered to myself, a sly grin almost splitting my face in two. Suddenly, I felt invincible, standing at the epicenter of a raucous, waterlogged renaissance, while Gloria's attempts to dampen our spirits felt as futile as fishing in a desert. Turning to my newfound allies, I suggested we form an assembly line, one that could hydrate a small village, competing to outdo each other's water-flinging artistry. "Let's show her a splash," I declared, adopting an exaggerated emphasis on the word splash. My neighbors cheered in agreement, grinning ear to ear. It was absurd and yet liberating in ways I never quite could have anticipated. Here we were, prepared to unite against the oppressive overlords of order, each bucket becoming a symbol of our defiance. As we allowed the torrent of collective joy to wash over us, I noticed something remarkable. The facial creases forming around Gloria's mouth visibly softened, as though laughter had finally cracked the iron shield she had donned. Sure, she was still scowling, but those gritted teeth of her wrath faltered with picked eyebrows and wide eyes, processes slowing as humor slipped through her steady hold like sand through her clenched fists. "Look at her trying so hard," I chuckled to Sam, who gave an enthusiastic nod as he whipped another bucket towards the assembled crew, splashing unexpectedly onto an unprepared dog that had wandered too close. Not even the finest mystery novel could depict such a gripping climax. My heart flickered with delight as I conceived broader visions of what our absurd plot could escalate into, perhaps even plucking at the heartstrings of our local misanthrope. Just as the revelry seemed to reach its zenith, Gloria's air of control crumbled like an unsteady tower of cards. "You're all behaving like children," she hollered, her voice cracking slightly, nearly blending with the raucous laughter that continued unabated. The neighbors nearly cheered at this, a moment of brave defiance layered with the kind of raw joy she had long forbidden. "Oh, dear Gloria," I called back, grinning with reckless abandon, "you mustn't forget that we have to embrace our inner child to summon every bit of joy lurking beneath those carefully smoothed-out edges." I splashed another motion towards our resident management expert, only to find that my foam-flecked words acted like a magic spell, invigorating the crowd. A chorus of oohs echoed as more buckets launched toward her, gently bouncing off the constructs of her immovable facade, turning the air thick with whimsical defiance. What transpired next was almost poetic in its absurdity. Gloria, stumbling in her tailored heels, gradually succumbed to the momentum of collective mirth, splashing forward like a ship navigating rough waters, of her own making, mind you. With every clumsy sidestep, she struggled against the tide, retaining some decorum, yet emitting a few reluctant giggles. She suddenly became the unwitting star of our show, and with that revelation, the preposterous notion crept into my mind. Was there hope for a reconciliation? What if there was a chance for Gloria to shed her rigid persona, and by practicing resilience, dive into the quagmire of true community with us? The thought made my chest swell with unbridled excitement. Perhaps Our place in the neighborhood didn't have to be an endless cycle of confrontations and sanctions. With our glorious, messy creation rising in the community center like the tide of our fermented laughter, we watched as Gloria, now completely drenched, succumbed further to an uncontainable chuckle. Yes, she managed to maintain her stern expression at first, but as a merge of drenching surrender and wild joy crossed her face, it became abundantly clear she yearned to embrace this nonsensical jamboree. "Why, Jordan, if you hadn't made such a splash about your houseboat," she began, the hint of playful sarcasm dancing in her voice, "perhaps we could have discussed this over coffee instead of half the community being primed for an aquatic uprising." A collective gasp of disbelief sparked within the crowd, yet we held our breath. Was this the beginning of a thaw, or merely the final exhalation of resistance? "Coffee?" I echoed, feigning shock. "You do realize my lounge chair is drowning. Maybe next time we could consider bringing the pots and pans too. I heard they make for great party favors." I winked, not quite reining in the cheeky satisfaction that flooded through me. The laughter erupted again. Who would have thought that shared absurdity would undermine Gloria's neatly pressed plans for our conformity? We stood there, dripping in revelry, cementing bonds forged through the simple act of fun. Before long, as I surveyed the chaos now sprinkled with incandescent joy, the principles of our HOA could actually be reimagined. What if a vote for neighbors meant voting for our collective spirit, and the laughter really might be enough to lift our stagnant status quo? With that, I could hardly contain the excitement bubbling within me as I called for the next huge wave of water to be flung into the mixture of lively faces, echoing excitement and a newfound sort of camaraderie with our neighborhood. Perhaps, just maybe, Gloria's sharp edges softened that day. Perhaps she was ready to embrace laughter among her rigid bylaws. Her reality was not an impenetrable fortress. It was merely the beginning of a far grander expedition into mirthful chaos and communal joy. Who knew how many more belly laughs and unexpected alliances awaited on the horizon? The atmosphere crackled with electric energy as laughter mingled with splashes, glistening like jewels in the warm glow of the winter sun. Gloria's transformation from eminent control freak to a soggy participant in our merriment felt like witnessing a solar eclipse, impossible not to watch in awe. As I surveyed my neighbors, dripping and giggling in the face of our once dreaded HOA overlord, murmurs of a potential community meeting flipped in my mind like a freshly caught fish. What if we turned this chaotic storm into a gathering of reparations? Sam mused, his curls now sticking out in all directions, thanks to the unexpected deluge, adding a personalized flair to the already flamboyant scene. It was wild, it was audacious, and it could rally our entire neighborhood for a glorious, let's turn the tide meeting. With newfound resolve, I waved my hands dramatically to draw attention. All right, folks. As enticing as this spontaneous aquatic circus might be, I propose we solidify this moment into something even more meaningful. A neighborhood meeting where we can reshape the HOA's ironclad policies into something a little less suffocating. The crowd was still pumped with joy as I continued, adrenaline weaving through the atmosphere. Imagine, if you will, discussing our community values while we throw in a potluck of opinions flavored with fun instead of frowns. And who doesn't love food? The suggestive clink of kitchenware filled my ears as my neighbors nodded along, scribbling down ideas for the dishes they'd bring, their spirits lifted. They were genuinely thrilled to be invited back into the glorious chaos of the HOA conversation, not as mere subjects to be ruled, but rather as partners in progress. I looked over at Gloria, who, to my utter astonishment, bore an expression that could only be described as bewildered but intrigued. "You can't be serious about turning a soggy carpet meeting into a riot, can you?" she quipped, her voice still retaining that clipped authority, but tethered now with a hint of reluctant humor. It was the first step towards deflating the iron jacket she always wore. "Oh, sure, Gloria, because nothing says meetings like coffee stains and the scent of soggy paper." I shot back, taking full advantage of my momentary upper hand. Everyone exploded into laughter again, the sound reverberating around the community center, creating a harmonious backdrop for the day's shenanigans. The floodwaters of our laughter washed over us, and soon enough, we were brainstorming ways to repopulate our clubhouse with a broader sense of joy intermingled with decorum. How about we add some fun monthly gatherings? An art night where Gloria can showcase her talent at collating complaints? Maybe even bake-offs where we can bring our culinary flops for her critique? My mind raced, playing with ideas like a kid in a candy store. Gloria's eyes twinkled slightly, as if the thought of whipping our ridiculous shared contributions into a celebratory affair might not be so detestable after all. Why not? Every complaint documented with cupcakes. You know, for morale. She countered playfully, the tension between her crisp persona and budding camaraderie loosening by the minute, and for a quick second, I could almost see her transform into the mythical neighborhood heroine who saves hearts rather than scold licenses. As visions of community bonding danced through my mind, it bolstered my spirits even higher, and I exclaimed, "All right, consider this the great rebirth of our neighborhood. Let's return to how we once knew each other, a vibrant, thrilling community instead of hive mind drones. With laughter as our secret weapon, who's in?" Cheering erupted behind me like the crescendo of a movie score, bolstering the atmosphere and making me feel like a victorious leader. Gloria even rolled her eyes, as she practically giggled behind trapped lips, crafting a picture of shy conformity uprooted before our eyes. "You know, I may have to consult the bylaws. Such chaos could bring in uproarious interests," she said, and nobody could mistake her tone anymore. As the glow of the sun began to merge into various shades of peach and purple, the concept of transformation felt electric, an imminent spark of promise enveloping our previously austere little community. We were all in this together. The HOA didn't need to spell doom, but rather breathe life into what was possible in our little floating haven. I could hardly believe we'd reached this point, mocking Gloria in a playful, riotous retaliation, only to unite in laughter, creating alliances stronger than any voting measure could dream of. Who knew that the day the HOA towed my houseboat would turn into a bonding moment over drowning ignorance in joyous rebellion? Perhaps that was precisely the essence of life, lived fully, transforming delightful mischief into a foundation of hope and enthusiasm. Now, as we each left the quagmire of giggles and unexpected cheer, filled with thoughts of how to mix smiles with policies, was that truly the dawning of a new chapter for our community? Thanks for tuning in. It really means a lot to us. If you're still fired up from this HOA showdown, check out our next jaw-dropping battle on the right, or let YouTube surprise you with another wild ride on the left. Take your pick, and I'll see you in the next neighborhood drama.